Life hacks, leadership tips, stories, and fun. It's time for Two Guys on Stuff with Michael Edwards and Tom Tobin. They're executives, entrepreneurs, and great friends. And this is a conversation about values-based, purpose-driven leadership that can transform you, your organization, and the world. Now, let's hear what stuff the guys are talking about this week.
Welcome back to Two Guys on Stuff, where we talk about the real stuff behind entrepreneurship, leadership, and culture. Today's episode's a little different. We're 6 episodes in the season, and the feedback's been rolling in. So we thought, why not pause and talk directly to you, our listeners? Yeah, that was good.
Like that?
Yeah. We've gotten questions, shout outs, and honest feedback on everything from startup advice to leadership blind spots. We've heard from founders, first-time managers, and even a few people who just want to hang out with us during their morning drive. So today is built around your voices. We're pulling back the curtain, sharing what we've heard, and responding in real time. We'll also revisit 2 of our more popular episodes from the past season, leadership lessons from Ted Lasso, Michael Scott, and more, and avoid these leadership behaviors because the truth is, great leadership is timeless. So whether this is your first episode or you've been with us since the beginning, thanks for being part of this community. And if we haven't met before, my name is Michael Edwards, and this is my good friend and co-host, Tom Tobin.
Howdy.
Let's jump in.
All right, let's do it. And I'll explain my Texas A&M Aggie.
Oh boy, here we go.
Just a bit. There's 2 purposes. One is just to get the mojo moving. You know, we're playing Missouri this weekend. We're 7-0. Haven't been there since 1994. So I realize that, you know, other schools may have been able to accomplish that, but I'm a diehard fan, and we're excited. So, but I'm gonna talk about the importance of having a team in just a little bit.
Awesome. So we've got questions kind of grouped into the topics, and the first topic we'll talk about is entrepreneurship. I know it's near and dear to your heart, Tom. We've had a lot of listeners talk about or ask about getting started and staying motivated. And the first question is, how do you know when it's time to quit your day job and go all in on your business?
Yeah, that's tough because there's some things that we could guide people through, but really it comes down to them. They have to be mentally ready. I would say that in order to be prepared to know when it's time to quit your day job and go all in is, number one, have you done the kind of mental and emotional searching that needs to take place before you do that? And that means that you've connected to your own thoughts, and whether it's something that you're praying about, something that you've considered, something that you've outlined, you've done your pro forma, those types of things, all the tactical types of things. But it also is, and you can't underestimate the power of the emotional piece of this, because you're getting ready to disconnect to a quote unquote relatively secure job, and we all know that sometimes jobs aren't as secure as we think they are, and do something that is totally unknown to you. So there's all the other people in your life that you have to consider, your spouse, your children. You know, if it's just you, it's a whole lot easier to, rage against the storm and go, do something impulsive. It's something altogether different if your family is dependent upon your current regular flow of income. So I think, number one is, have you done the soul searching necessary and connected with the people that are going to be most impacted by your decision? And are you all in agreement? Even if you don't completely understand it, have you had open and honest dialogue about it? The second thing is I would recommend that you have at least 6 months worth of your bills paid, not paid up in advance necessarily, but you've got a treasure chest where you've saved money and prepared. This is not something that you want to do expecting that you're suddenly going to begin raking in the dough the next month. I mean, if that's part of your plan and you don't have any way to execute that because you don't have customers already saying, no, if you start on January 1st, you've got all my business, then you are exposing yourself to an incredible amount of problems. Because oftentimes what happens in that situation is they end up going head first into it, and then that just becomes a slow and steady tumble, because then they get in debt and they never can work themselves out of their debt. So If you're not able to put away any savings right now in order to prepare for this financially, now's not the time. At least it wouldn't be to me. Sometimes people come into a sum of money through, unfortunate circumstances, maybe the loss of a loved one who's left it to them in a will. I've got a potential client right now whose mom left him two sums of money in an IRA.
Nice.
And I'll talk about that in just a little bit, but he's evaluating whether or not it's time to grow his business or actually go the opposite direction, just go work for somebody as an electrician. His biggest concern is that he's going to end up working just as hard, but for somebody else, or take some of that money and invest it in the growth and development of his business. So yeah, that's what I would say is how do you know when it's time to quit your day job and go all in? Address those. Are you prepared mentally? Are you prepared monetarily? And most importantly, are you in sync with the people that are going to be most impacted?
Yeah, I think that the monetarily piece is an important piece because I've seen many people, jump into the business and then, I've got to figure out how to provide food, clothing, and shelter for my family.
Mm-hmm.
So, my rule of thumb is 6 months. Can you provide food, clothing, and shelter for 6 months while you're getting through this? But also, you've said it in several episodes where you've got to sacrifice. You're going to be making a smaller amount of money. I'm not going to be able to write myself a paycheck for a while. So that was a big one. The other one for me, what that is a decision point is I've got my full-time gig and we'll call the business the side hustle. At what point do I abandon the full-time gig for the side hustle? And for me, it's really, is my growth stopped in my side hustle right now? I can't go any further unless I devote more time. I think that is a good decision point as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. If you've already started doing something on the side and you've reached a point at which you just can't grow simply because you can't apply the time to it, but if you put the time into it, you could grow. That's where you really want to step back, look at your performance and say, okay, if I apply 20 more hours or 30 more hours of work of my physical time in the business, that equates to X number of dollars.
Yep.
It's much easier when you're looking at a service type of business where you know that, hey, if I go out and I do, 30 hours worth of service work, I'm going to generate X amount of dollars. And if you've got that work prepared, definitely, I agree with you. That's when you can make the leap.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so here's the next one. I've got the skills, but not the network. What's your advice for building relationships?
That's where my Aggie relationships come in. Now, I'm not an Aggie. I'm a wannabe, but I did birth one, and she got her bachelor's and master's there. Okay, and my son-in-law did as well. So I at least bought a ring, but I've always been a faithful fan ever since I graduated from high school. I wanted to go to A&M, but I just didn't have options at that time and didn't understand what was available to me. So I went into the Army instead. That being said, there's several things about like the Aggie core, the Aggie traditions are very, very strong. Okay. And when you don't necessarily have skills, you have tactical or technical skills, but you don't have networking skills, you've got to build relationships. And I think that's the thing is no matter where you go, we were just talking to some Aggie friends that we had dinner with the other night that we hadn't seen in quite some time. And they were talking about, they were in Australia and ended up seeing somebody wearing an Aggie ring.
Oh, wow.
We were in Germany actually, and we had gone over to Italy, and we were traveling around that day. And on our way back, we were waiting for a train and sitting at a table, and I'm watching some people in front of me, some young men, and they were Aggies. They had Aggie rings on, and we connected. My point is that you have to build a network of people that can be a support network for you. They don't necessarily have to be doing the same thing. They didn't have to go to the same school, but to have a group of people that can be your go-to for when you're challenged, when you're waking up at night and you're sweating and you're like, I can't do this. People that will encourage you. That's always good. But sometimes people can encourage you to do the wrong things or press on when you shouldn't be. So you also have to have, at least a couple of people that will tell you, hey, I don't think that's a good idea. So don't look at that, or don't look at those people as being negative. They are as necessary as all of the people that are willing to cheer you on. because they are going to help you identify potential problems. They're your risk managers, and you need that role. When you look at some of the tests that you can do, and it helps develop, like, are you a lion or a, or a puppy? And, there's all different kinds of stuff. There's different tests that you can do to determine what color you are, and your color determines X. At the end of the day, they all have similar qualities in terms of, it's not about how you determine who other people are. It's how you understand yourself, and then you understand the role that other people can play that aren't exactly like you. And so I'd encourage you to identify who you are. Take a couple of those psychological profile tests to determine what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and then look for people that support you in your weaknesses. That's not something to be afraid of. That's actually a sign of greater emotional, greater EQ, greater emotional intelligence, to understand yourself, and then to understand how other people engaging with you can be helpful to you. And so I would encourage you to build a network of people who aren't just like you, so that you get that iron sharpening iron effect. And start with people in your church, people that are coaches or other parents that you meet through your children's little league, or whatever the case may be. However you build community, look for people in those areas first, and then see how you can get connected. Community resources, things that you can get through your county or your city. And so that's where I'd start.
Yeah. And I think that, well, first, you are probably the best model for networking. For those of you who don't know, Tom is an amazing connector. He knows everybody. And, that's definitely a skill that not everyone has. But, in general, I think that people really need to get out of their comfort zone, get uncomfortable in different situations. That's kind of first and foremost. I think number two, more tactical. There's so many networking groups out there that you can join. B&I is a fantastic networking group, where you bring people leads, they give you leads, those kinds of things.
Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, Chamber of Commerce is a great one. And just tactically, you can get involved in some of those. But I think getting out of your comfort zone is really the way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point about surrounding yourself with people, iron sharpens iron, it's also important to know who you're taking advice from.
Right.
Have they been there? I mean, is somebody trying to give me advice on how to build a $10 million business when they've never done it before or anything close to that?
Yeah, exactly.
Super important.
Yeah. And if they failed 3 or 4 times, you could learn from that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't take advice on how to do it right, but I would definitely recognize what they did wrong.
Yeah. What do they learn from their
failure? And that's not a knock. I'm just saying some people you learn more from by watching them and knowing what not to do.
Yep.
So
I think I mentioned on some past podcasts a couple of leaders who I've learned how not to lead from.
Absolutely. We've all worked for people who we just thought, you are terrible as a leader.
Yep.
And probably they would be a worse follower. But, because they did well technically and were successful at one level, they got promoted. They call it the Peter Principle, promoted beyond the level of competence. But the reality of it is, I like what you said, just, learning despite where you are in your space.
Yep. Love it.
So I think one additional thing I want to kind of go back and talk about, kind of what's the most overlooked mindset that new entrepreneurs need to make. And that goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning, with that time, that moment that you make that mental shift, where so I think that most overlooked mind shift new entrepreneurs need to make has to do with that moment where they decide, okay, I'm going to do this. It's challenging. So you have to decide what is your list. Nobody can decide your list for you, what your comfort level is, what your risk tolerance is. Do you have banking resources? Again, do you have the financial resources? The gentleman that I was talking about with the electrical company, he's got a crew of 1. He wants to grow to a crew of 3. And he doesn't necessarily want to do that in a year. That would be probably very disastrous, but he wants to do that over the next 2 to 3 years, with having about 3 to 4 people per crew. And he's looking at the situation where he's got access to a couple of IRAs that were left to him. And so it's a really important decision where you're sitting there going, well, do I take, a couple $100,000 in IRAs and just invest them and go work for somebody and just see what those do for me in 20 years? Or do I continue to drive this business forward? So while he's already overcome the point at which he was, I first started working with him, he's just an individual guy working out of his own truck. And then he started adding on people, building relationships. But he's had to neglect the entire service side of the business because he's been doing new construction, those types of things. So he had an entire segment that there was an opportunity for growing that he hasn't been able to capitalize on. And so, I told him, I said, you're going to make money two ways. One is we're going to look at your expenses because we're going to create efficiencies that I know right now don't exist based on our conversations. And two, opportunities for growing that revenue. But one of the things that if you're going to do this and you don't talk to us, that's okay. But if you're going to do it, don't engage with somebody where you get locked into a 1-year contract. So this is going to be critical. When you make that mindset shift, here's a nugget, here's a piece of advice. When you do that, make sure that anybody that you work with has very tangible goals and that you are able to see results occur over time. And at any point during that time, you can terminate the relationship. I mean, if I was working with a doctor and they were supposed to be helping me with my health and I was committed 100% doing everything that I was told and I wasn't making progress, I'd probably begin asking, are they giving me good advice? Maybe having ice cream before I go to bed at night, isn't allowable, or whatever the case may be. I'd also be looking at the doctor. Are they healthy? One of the worst things I saw as a healthcare provider in a 30-year career was healthcare providers giving health advice and being completely unhealthy themselves.
Right.
I'm like, that's terrible.
And their practice.
Exactly. So in any case, I think just in terms of overlook mindset and making that shift, that's an important thing to consider. So
I think another piece that many entrepreneurs don't understand early on is you have to work really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I go back to real estate agents. Tom and I are intimately familiar with the real estate industry. And there's so many people who, spend a couple $1,000 to get their real estate license, their education. And then they're sitting there on day one going, what do I do? What's next?
Mm-hmm.
And, just pick up the phone and, make 100 phone calls. Well, I don't like to talk on the phone. That's going to be a challenge.
Probably wrong job.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, it's a grind. You have to work very hard. The benefit or the what's in it for me is eventually you'll be able to say, I don't pick up the telephone because I only work on referrals, or, I don't work on Saturdays because I've earned the right to do that. But, the grind is real. You've got to really grind it out. It's not easy.
Yeah. If I've used this analogy, I've used it, once, but I'll use it 1,000 times. And I talk to any one of my clients, and I've talked to a number of people that are looking at going into business for themselves and told them the same thing. It's like building a train. At the beginning, you've got to know the mechanics of the train. You've got to build a really solid vehicle that's going to be moving along the tracks. And, trains don't just curve around. It's not like meandering. So that for me is you setting your goal. Your goal is set and it's straight. That's where you bring in your mission, your vision, your culture. All of those things are your tracks. But the train itself is the work that you're going to be doing. It's your business. And it takes a long time to get the train built, to determine which direction you're going to go, and then begin fueling it. And so it's going to take a long time to get it cranking and moving on those tracks. And you're going to be putting a lot of fuel in terms of time and energy. And I think to your point, definitely it's not going to be a 40-hour-a-week job. And as you're doing that, you're going to begin to build up inertia. So yeah, years later, the train's moving and it's going to take less of your specific energy to put into it to continue it moving forward. But at the beginning, it's a lot of hard work. And talking to other people that are in the business as you're building up your network is a really important part of that, to really get the truth about what's involved with owning your own business. And even real estate, people think, oh, I'll get my real estate license and, suddenly everybody's going to be asking me, all my friends and family are going to be asking me to sell their house and do all those types of things. Well, if you get too emotional about it, you're going to be crushed, because guess what? They've already got their own real estate people. And it doesn't matter that you're the brother or sister or cousin or family member or friend. They've already got the real estate person, and they're not going to use you. So handle rejection, really well.
Yeah.
So anyways, just that whole train analogy is a picture for me and what I express to others as in terms of the work that goes behind it. Now, sooner or later, the wind's blowing in your hair, you're honking the horn, and you're doing great.
Yeah.
But it doesn't start that way. So, as we're talking about culture, and I think these came in after a couple of our culture episodes, which we've said time and time again, culture is extremely important. And we talk about culture over strategy. But for you, what does that look like day to day?
So before you jump into the day to day, let's kind of just talk about strategy versus culture. Strategy is your plan, right? It's on paper, it's on the wall, it's whatever. That's the direction that you want to go. But culture is how the people act while following the plan, and I think that's important. You can have the best strategy in the world, and we've said this in several episodes. But if you don't have the trust in each other, you don't work hard, it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
And we've said several times, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So
Right.
At the end of the day, it's because how people treat each other and work together matters more than having a good plan on paper.
Right.
And there's probably a ton of examples of having of organizations that have a really solid strategy, but kind of fell apart in the execution.
Yeah.
And I think during COVID that was really apparent because many of the strategic plans that a lot of organizations had fell apart because all of a sudden they have to figure out how to work from home and decentralize and all that good stuff, and they didn't have a great culture to begin with. But so back to the question, how does that look day to day? It looks exactly like I just described. How do you act? How do you leaders act? And I use an example of a wireless company I once worked for. This company, every single employee, whether they were customer facing or not, was focused on the customer. And the CEO said there's two jobs at this company. There's those who serve customers, and there's those who serve customers. And you could tell that was part of their culture. You could walk into any one of their retail stores and shout, "Customers expect it," and everybody would drop what they're doing and shout, "We deliver."
Oh, wow.
It was amazing. And I've talked about this company before because they were a small regional player. They didn't have all the bells and whistles that everybody had, but they had the lowest churn in the industry and the highest customer satisfaction in the industry because of the culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it's how those people act. So you've got your mission, your vision, and your values, and those should be the lenses by which you make decisions on a day-to-day basis. And the things that are in your strategic plan should get you closer to that mission, vision, and value. But it's some of the visual things. When I'm thinking of culture, do I treat people with respect? This isn't widely heard in the business world, but I approach management as love for others. And this company that I just mentioned, the wireless company, they actually counted in their annual engagement survey how often love was mentioned. It was just absolutely amazing. So again, culture executed day to day is how we act, how we treat each other. What are we focused on?
Yeah.
Are we focused on the bottom line? Or are we focused on taking care of the customer?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we said at Grease Monkey was that we're in the service business, not just auto service. We serve people.
Yep.
And we just happen to do that by changing their oil. But, we could easily do that by selling shoes or any other aspect, anything else. But we came to serve people that day. And that way we always kept our eye on the prize, so to speak, because, having a guest in was a prize for us. It was a blessing for us. And so, yeah, I think that's great in terms of how you keep your focus. As it relates to culture, but also just in leadership, one of our guests asked the question, that sounds good, but how do you lead when you're not in charge? And we hear that a lot. Like, how do I lead when I'm not in charge? I don't have the official title of manager or supervisor. How do I lead? And so how would you answer that? I got my own thoughts too.
Yeah. So I love that question because much of my career has been leading through influence, and you don't need a title to lead. And matter of fact, there's a lot of great books probably called exactly that.
Yeah, exactly.
Matter of fact, Mark Sanborn wrote one, and I think it is called "You Don't Need a Title to Lead." But it talks about how if you have the vision to get people to achieve a goal, then you can start this process, and it's the power of influence. There's four different types of power, and one of them that unfortunately is used most often is positional power. I've got the title, so you have to do what I say. And even when I am in roles where I have the title, I rarely use positional power, because I like to use influential power of influence, to help people understand what they can do. My purpose is to help others discover and unleash their potential. And part of that position, or part of that influential leadership, is helping them do that, and it gets everybody to their goal. The other piece of leading without a title in terms of power is the reverent power, the power of being the expert, or the knowledge person. And you'll actually see that, you could be in a conference room and somebody will ask a question, and all of a sudden everybody in the conference room is going to look at the person who's the leader, whether it's the leader by title or the leader by action.
Right.
I call that the de facto leader.
Yeah.
And that's pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, and typically the people who are using the positional power are the weakest leader. They're the ones that, you must submit to my authority.
Yep.
I'm the boss here, and the buck stops here until there's a problem, and then they'll pass the buck. So those are typically, if they have to assert their authority because they're the partner with the most money, or and I've seen them, or they're they're the boss, I'm the CEO, etc., then that's probably the weakest leader in the room.
Yep.
I look at it like this. You could look at a group of kids on a playground, and you'll know right away who the leaders are. And they're the ones that have the most influence. And they'll be the ones that say, hey, let's do such and such. And all the other kids go, oh, okay, that's great. That person, I think I'd like to watch them longitudinally. Well, I'd like to watch them grow up and see where they are in a business 20 years later, or in college, because I'll bet that they're probably a leader at that point too. So what I would say is that you can be a leader just simply by your behavior.
Absolutely.
You can lead people in how to be a great employee.
Yep.
How to receive instruction and receive direction and execute a plan successfully. You can lead in all those ways. Leading oftentimes is just typically associated with I'm the boss, but leading happens on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you lead your family, but you don't have to walk through life going, I'm the father. This is what you're going to do. And if you do that, and if you have to do that, then you probably have less of a relationship than you do a position. And I'll tell you, it will last a lot longer if you have relationship over position. So yeah, I think I love what you said though. That's great.
As you were talking about observing it on the playground, I was just, a smile came on my face, because I remember when Michael was in first grade. Michael's my son. He's 25 years old now. And I got called to the school for the parent-teacher conference. Not the normally scheduled ones, but the one about, hey, your kid's a problem.
Right.
So I sit down with this school teacher, and she said, Michael is causing problems for his friends. I'm like, tell me more. Well, he gets them to drop what they're doing and do what he wants them to do. I had to pause for a minute and think about exactly how I was going to word my response. And I didn't do such a great job. I said, well, from where I come from, that's called leadership. And our challenge, his teacher and his parents, is how do we nurture that?
Yeah.
Just kind of blew me away.
Yeah. It's funny because, if you flip the script, so to speak, in the situation with me, my daughter taught me something. We love our family. If you listen to this, you know that we love our families. We're passionate about what we do, but we love our families. And our daughter Ashley was at a party, and I went to go pick her up. She was probably about 14 years old, maybe 15, before she had her license, of course. And so I went to go pick her up at a party, and I'm waiting for her, and I'm waiting for her, and then I'm texting her, and hey, where are you? And I'm waiting outside to pick her up, and finally she comes bopping out with a big smile on her face. And of course, as her dad, and she being 15, 20 minutes late, as I'm sitting out there, I wasn't happy. And I was just, I wasn't yelling, but I just like, where were you? I've been sitting here waiting this entire time. You knew I was going to pick you up at this time. And she said, well, when we were sitting around as a group, her and her friends, they were all encouraged to tell, stories from their life. So, or they could tell a ghost story, whatever. And so when Ashley shared her story, she gave her testimony about when she became a Christian.
Oh, cool.
And one of the girls that was there called her to the side and said, would you come talk to me? And pulled Ashley into the bathroom so the two of them could talk, and she could hear about how Ashley had become a Christian and what that meant to her in her life, and about her faith. And Ashley was actually praying with her while I was sitting out steaming.
That's cool.
And I thought, when was the last time that I had somebody in my life ask me about my faith, that I was living it out in such a way that they asked me about my faith and wanted to know more about it? So trust me, you
cool.
do not need to be in a position of power to be a leader. And so, but what's one leadership behavior that kind of kills momentum? How do you correct it?
Yeah. So, talking about leaders who lead with positional power, they typically tend to lead through regulation and fear.
Mm-hmm.
Do this or you're in trouble.
Oh, absolutely.
And the flip side of that, how do you correct that, is you have to teach them to lead through inspiration and empowerment. The exact opposite of regulation and fear. And it's not an easy thing to teach a leader to lead through inspiration and empowerment. It's definitely a skill that they learn. And one of the things I've found with leaders who struggle empowering their constituents is the fear that they're going to get in trouble if they empower their people to do something and they do something wrong. So going back to culture, you have to have a culture of a learning. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I'm going to use this term in the proper sense when I say that you're giving your employees a safe space. I'm not talking about giving them, blankies and the whole woke thing. Give them a binky or give them milk and cookies and a place to cry and snuggle at lunchtime. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is within the context of a business meeting, they need to know that it's safe to challenge what's being discussed.
Yep.
Without being cut down. I think it's critically important that you build an environment where people are able to identify something that's a potential issue and raise it so that it can be addressed, and have them not be in fear that that is going to somehow put them at odds with you.
Yeah, totally agree.
So as we're wrapping up, the couple topics, one was fan favorites, and then kind of a nugget round if we want to hit that too. But it's funny, we continue to get feedback about our episodes on Ted Lasso, Michael Scott, those types of topics that we've discussed. Why do you think that resonated with our listeners so well?
I think that two very different reasons. Ted Lasso, I think, resonated with our listeners because he was a real guy who just believed in people. He loved people. I still love he put a sign, he taped it up above his office wall, and it said "Believe." And he was able to achieve great success because of that. And he was just approachable, nice, caring. What you think about a guy from Wichita, Kansas is what Ted Lasso represented.
Yeah.
Michael Scott was a little bit different because he was a goofball, affable, but he, I think, connected with the people in his office, and as a result, the audience who watched, 9 seasons of The Office, because he just loved people.
Right.
The very last episode, he was at the wedding of Dwight and Angela, and was talking about how all of his kids are getting married, and just this prideful thing. It was just cool stuff. But he just loved people. There, he did demonstrate some leadership competence every once in a while, which kind of came out. But his deal was he just loved people. That was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think all of us have recognized in those two images people that we've seen in our own lives, like where we've all had that boss that is just an idiot, but then we have people who they just don't maybe possess the level of competence, but their heart is in the right place.
Yeah,
So you're willing to tolerate more from people who
exactly.
really just care about you.
Yeah,
They may not say it right, they may not do it right all the time, but ultimately that they care about you.
yep,
So I would rather be somebody that cares about others and doesn't do it right all the time than somebody who doesn't care about others, even if I had the exact right strategy every time. Because sometimes it's not about you. Oftentimes it's about lifting other people up. And if you don't challenge other people in the right way, and you're not going to them in a way that they trust, it's irrelevant.
yeah. I worked for
So,
a Michael Scott one time, and he wasn't quite as funny, but he was very similar in mannerisms, and he drove me nuts. He'd say something, and I'm like, oh, gosh, I can't believe this. But when I learned his heart,
mhm.
kind of liked him, and I'd do more for him.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So what do you think? Nugget round, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah. So, what about one thing you've learned from a listener or guest?
What amazed me was our conversation with Ralph and Lori.
Yeah.
First of all, I just love them to death, but I never realized there was a resource like them, that there was a resource that could connect me as a wannabe franchisee to franchisors who would help me vet the process. And I didn't have to pay a thing. I spent months calling different oil and car companies and service companies, mufflers and brakes and oil change places and stuff like that, until I actually connected with Ralph, because he had a position at Grease Monkey at the time. And that was what amazed me, was that there's people that are out there that are willing to help you make one of, like, the most important business decision of your life, partnering with somebody else. They go through an amazingly complex legal document with you that you would spend tens of thousands of dollars doing with an attorney at $400 to $500 an hour, and they do all of that at no cost to you. And that I thought was just absolutely amazing. So that kind of feedback, or learning that, was absolutely critical. And I think, just from a feedback standpoint, hearing from people that have listened to our show, gotten a nugget, and it's made a difference in their day,
Yeah.
like that means the world to me. So
Yeah. I think the Lori and Ralph episodes were pretty impactful. One of the things that kind of blew me away was how you can get into a real live home based franchise for 75 grand.
mhm.
That kind of surprised me.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have $1 million in the bank to do it.
Yeah.
And even if it's in the disclosure document, sometimes those can be adjusted, that if you're not having an advocate there for you, it would never happen.
Yeah.
So, well, as we're wrapping up, I want to thank you listeners for tuning in. We do this, and we are not trying to be, the next greatest thing in terms of podcast, but we want to be a great thing for you, and we want to provide you nuggets. And so I just want to thank the listeners that have continued to support us. And I would just ask that they share our episodes with their friends. We're on YouTube now, where I'm doing the podcast. So if you're listening and you didn't see me in my Aggie garb, then make sure that you watch the YouTube too. But if you wouldn't mind, share this with your friends, share it with family, because you never know, it might be that next or subsequent iteration of a share, and somebody tags another person who's thinking about it, and in that moment we could be an assistance to them, and hopefully a blessing to them, even if they never contact us. If we'll at least hear from you and say, hey, forward this over, and my friends really liked it, that would just mean a lot to us, to encourage us to continue to move forward. and know that we're impacting people, impacting lives and families.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks for hanging out with us on Two Guys on Stuff. We're grateful for the feedback, the questions, and the chance to keep the conversations going. If today's episode gave you something to think about, as Tom said, share it. Send it to a friend, drop us a note, or leave a review. We're here to serve leaders, builders, and everyday people who want to grow with purpose. Remember, strategy sets the direction, but culture determines if you'll get there. And we'll see you next time. Keep leading well.
Giga Mags.
And that.
Thanks for listening to Two Guys on Stuff. Tune in next week as Tom and Michael talk more about leadership stuff, life stuff, helpful stuff, and maybe even your stuff. Until then, keep your stories fun.